He cut my debit card in half, right there in the bank lobby, telling me I didn't fit the profile. He had no idea he'd just declared war on the man who owned the entire bank. It was a Tuesday. The kind of gray, unremarkable Tuesday that's perfect for seeing things as they really are, without the sunshine to pretty them up. I've always believed you learn more about a business on a rainy Tuesday than on a sunny Friday. People are just themselves. And that's what I wanted to see. I'd spent 30 years building a construction empire from the ground up, starting with a rusty pickup and a set of second-hand tools. Now most of my days were spent in boardrooms, looking at spreadsheets that were supposed to represent people and places. But numbers don't have a soul. They don't tell you if your staff is happy, if your customers feel respected. So, a few times a year, I do what my CFO calls my undercover billionaire routine. I put on my old work boots, a pair of worn-in jeans, a flannel shirt, and a hat. Today it was my red MAGA hat, not because I wanted to start a political debate in the middle of a bank lobby, but because it's my hat. I'm a 62-year-old man from Ohio who believes in the principles I was raised on. Work hard, respect your elders, love your country, and don't take crap from anyone. The hat is a symbol of that for me. It's also a fantastic litmus test. You find out real quick what people are made of when they see it. The bank was Heritage Union, my largest single investment. After the 2008 crash, I'd swooped in and bought a controlling interest for pennies on the dollar, saving it from collapse. I kept the name, kept the original charter, because I believe in heritage. But I hadn't been to this particular branch in a suburb of Cleveland in over a decade. It looked sterile. Too much glass and chrome, not enough warmth. It felt like a clinic, not a place where you build your future. I got in the short line, my hands tucked in my pockets. I just wanted to make a simple, moderately large withdrawal from my personal checking account. $5,000 in cash, enough to trigger a question or two, maybe a manager's approval. A perfect test of their customer service protocols. The teller was a young woman, probably fresh out of college, with a nervous energy about her. She smiled, a little too brightly. "How can I help you today, sir?" "I'd like to withdraw $5,000, please," I said, sliding my debit card and my driver's license under the glass. Her fingers danced on the keyboard. Her brow furrowed slightly. "Okay, Mr. Franklin," she said, her voice a little quieter now. "One moment." She glanced over her shoulder towards a glass-walled office where a man in a tailored suit was staring intently at his computer monitor. He looked like he was born in that suit. Hair perfectly coiffed, a skinny tie knotted just so. He hadn't noticed me yet. The teller typed a bit more. "I'm sorry, sir, but for a withdrawal of this amount, I'll need my manager's approval." "No problem at all," I said, giving her a reassuring smile. She pressed a button on her desk, and a moment later the man in the suit emerged from his office. He moved with a kind of practiced, arrogant grace, like he was the lord of this small, marble-floored manor. He came to the counter, not looking at me, but at the teller's screen. "What's the issue, Chloe?" he asked, his voice smooth and condescending. "Mr. Franklin here would like a $5,000 cash withdrawal, Mr. Penhaligon. Just needs your sign-off." Finally, Mr. Penhaligon deigned to look at me. His eyes, a pale, washed-out blue, flicked from my face to the flannel shirt, down to my work boots, and then, like a magnet finding its pole, they locked onto my hat. The change was instantaneous. The thin, professional smile vanished, replaced by a barely concealed sneer. The air got 10 degrees colder. "I see," he said, drawing the words out. He took my card and ID from the teller, holding them with his fingertips as if they were contaminated. Daniel Franklin. He looked from the ID back to my face. "Big withdrawal for a man like yourself? What's it for?" "Buying a used pickup truck." I kept my voice even. "It's my money, Mr. Penhaligon. I don't believe I need to justify what I'm using it for." He let out a short, humorless laugh. He tapped a few keys on the teller's terminal, his movements sharp and aggressive. "There seems to be a flag on your account, Mr. Franklin. A security precaution." "A flag? I use this account every day. There was no flag this morning when I bought my coffee." "Things change," he said, his eyes gleaming with a kind of petty triumph. "We at Heritage Union have a responsibility to protect our customers' assets, even from—" questionable activity. He was practically spitting the words. The young teller, Chloe, looked like she wanted the floor to swallow her whole. She was staring at her shoes, her face bright red. "There is nothing questionable about me taking out my own money," I stated, my patience beginning to fray. "That's a matter of opinion," Penhaligon sniffed. He held up my debit card. "In fact, looking at the history here, and given the circumstances, I'm not convinced you are the legitimate owner of this card." My jaw tightened. "It has my name on it. The driver's license has my face on it. What more proof do you need?" He smiled, a truly nasty, triumphant grin. "In today's world, you can't be too careful. There are all sorts of undesirables. This bank has a certain standard to uphold, a certain class of clientele." He looked directly at my hat again. "And you, sir, do not fit the profile." And then he did it. With a flare of theatrical disgust, he reached under the counter and pulled out a pair of office scissors. He held my debit card up between his thumb and forefinger, right in front of my face. "For security reasons," he announced to the now silent bank lobby, "I am confiscating and destroying this potentially compromised card. You can file an appeal with our fraud department. They'll get back to you in 7 to 10 business days." Before I could even form a protest, he did it. The scissors closed with a sharp, definitive snap. The sound of plastic cracking echoed in the cavernous room. He cut my card clean in two. My card, for the bank that I owned. He slid the two plastic rectangles back under the glass, a monument to his petty authority. He looked at me, his chest puffed out, expecting me to yell, to curse, to make a scene. He was expecting a simple man to act simply. I did none of those things. I just stared. I stared at the two pieces of plastic. Then I slowly lifted my gaze to meet his smug, self-satisfied eyes. A cold, quiet calm washed over me, the kind of calm I get right before I close a 9-figure deal or fire a corrupt foreman. I let the silence stretch, watching the victory drain from his face and be replaced by a flicker of uncertainty. He cleared his throat. "Is there anything else?" I leaned forward slightly, my voice dropping to a low, conversational tone that was somehow louder than a shout in the dead, quiet bank. "Just one thing, Mr. Penhaligon," I said, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. "You see that name on those pieces of plastic? Franklin. I don't just bank here. I own the place, and you just declared war on your boss." A thick, syrupy silence hung in the bank. For a heartbeat, Mr. Penhaligon's face was a perfect mask of theatrical disbelief. It was as if I'd just announced I was a time traveler from the 19th century. Then the mask cracked, and a wave of derisive laughter erupted from him. It wasn't a genuine, happy laugh. It was a weapon, sharp and ugly, designed to cut me down to size. "Oh, that's rich," he sputtered, wiping a fake tear from the corner of his eye. "That's really, really rich. You own the place. Of course you do. And I suppose that's the presidential seal on your hat, not just a campaign slogan." He leaned towards Chloe, the teller, who was now a statue of pure terror. "You see, Chloe? This is the kind of delusion we have to deal with. A complete disconnect from reality. Probably thinks the bank tellers are printing money just for him in the back." I didn't react. I just watched him. I've dealt with men like Penhaligon my whole life. They build their tiny kingdoms on foundations of flimsy rules and imagined superiority. And when the walls start to shake, they don't run. They just shout louder, convinced the volume of their voice can hold back the tide. "Sir," he said, turning his full, condescending attention back to me. His face was all business now, a phony, painted-on concern. "I think you're confused. Perhaps you've had a difficult day. I'm going to have to ask you to leave the premises. If you refuse, I'll be forced to call security." "You do that," I said calmly. "Call them. But before you do, you might want to call someone else." I reached into my pocket, not for a wallet, but for my phone. It was a simple, sturdy smartphone. Nothing fancy, but it was my direct line to every corner of my empire. Penhaligon watched my every move, a smirk playing on his lips. He thought I was going to try and look up some proof on Google to show him a Wikipedia page. I swiped to my favorites and tapped the first name on the list, Richard Sterling, the CEO of Heritage Union Bank, the man I had personally headhunted and hired 5 years ago. I put the phone to my ear. It rang once, twice. Dan! To what do I owe the pleasure? Richard's voice was jovial, exactly as I expected. We'd played golf last Thursday. Penhaligon scoffed, loud enough for the growing number of onlookers to hear. Who did you call? Your lawyer? Your business manager? He stage-whispered to the security guard who had begun to drift over from his post by the door. I held up a hand to Richard, ignoring Penhaligon completely. Richard, I'm sorry to bother you. I'm having a bit of a customer service issue that I was hoping you could help me clear up. An issue? Dan, you know you have my direct line for a reason. Anything. What's wrong? One of your corporate accounts? No, nothing like that, I said. My eyes locked on Penhaligon, who was now beginning to look faintly irritated by my refusal to be intimidated. It's a personal matter. I'm at one of our branches, the one in Brook Park, and the branch manager has just cut up my debit card. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in Richard's head, the frantic calculation. The main shareholder, in a branch, getting his card cut up. It was a PR nightmare wrapped in an operational disaster. What? Richard's voice was a strained whisper. Cut it in half with a pair of scissors, I confirmed, my voice level. Said I didn't fit the profile of a Heritage Union customer. His name is... I glanced at the manager's nameplate. Mr. Penhaligon. Stay right there, Dan. Don't move. I'm handling this right now. The line went dead. I lowered the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. The whole exchange took less than 45 seconds. Penhaligon rolled his eyes. Was that supposed to impress me? A little phone call to your buddy. Are we done with the theatrics? He gestured to the security guard. Frank, please escort Mr. Franklin out of the building. He's causing a disturbance. The guard, a burly man named Frank, according to his tag, took a hesitant step forward. He looked uncomfortable, caught between the manager's direct order and my unnerving calm. He could sense something was wrong with the picture. Mr. Penhaligon, I said, my voice still quiet. I would advise you to tell Frank to stand down. And I would advise you to get out of my bank before you're removed in handcuffs for trespassing. He snapped, his composure finally cracking. His face was flushed, his voice a full octave higher. He had lost control, and he knew it. And then, a sound cut through the tension. A sharp, chirping ringtone. It wasn't my phone. Everyone in the lobby looked around. The sound was coming from inside Mr. Penhaligon's perfectly tailored suit jacket. He froze. A look of confusion washed over his features as he fumbled for his phone. He glanced at the screen, and every drop of blood drained from his face. His smug, arrogant expression dissolved into a mask of pure, unadulterated horror. His hand trembled as he swiped to answer, his eyes wide and locked on mine. Hello? He stammered into the receiver, his voice barely a whisper. He listened for a moment, his body going rigid. Mr. Sterling, sir? Yes, this is Penhaligon. I don't understand. His gaze shot from his phone back to my face, to my red hat, to my worn boots. And for the first time he wasn't seeing a political statement or a social class. He was seeing the ghost of his career. The confident sneer was gone, replaced by the dawning, sickening realization that he had just cut up the credit card of the most powerful man in his entire universe, and that man was still standing right in front of him. Penhaligon's conversation with Richard Sterling was a masterclass in silent film terror. He didn't say much. Mostly it was a series of strangled "yes, sirs" and "I understand, sirs." His eyes, wide and glassy, remained fixed on me. The color of his face shifted from ghost white to a blotchy, panicked red and back again. He was a fish on a hook, and Richard was slowly, methodically, reeling him in. The phone in his hand seemed to vibrate with the sheer force of the dressing down he was receiving. The entire bank lobby was frozen, a tableau of suspended transactions and gaping mouths. Everyone knew they were witnessing something monumental. They just didn't know what it was yet. Finally, with a convulsive nod, he whispered, "Yes, I will, immediately, sir." He hung up the phone, but he didn't put it away. His hand dropped to his side, the device clutched in a white-knuckled grip as if it were a life raft. He looked at me, and the man I saw now was a stranger. The arrogance had been stripped away, layer by painful layer, leaving behind a raw, trembling nerve of a man. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. "Mr. Franklin," he began, his voice raspy, unrecognizable from the smooth, condescending tone he'd used just minutes earlier. "There has been a terrible, a truly catastrophic misunderstanding." I just looked at him. I didn't give him an inch. I didn't nod or smile or offer any kind of absolution. I just waited. My silence was a vacuum, and it was pulling every last ounce of his composure into it. I was not aware," he stammered, gesturing vaguely with his free hand. "The protocol. The security flag. It was a mistake in the system. A glitch. I was merely following procedure to protect the bank's assets." "My assets, you mean?" I corrected him. My voice still quiet, but now it had a cold, hard edge to it. "You were protecting my assets from me." He flinched as if I'd slapped him. "Yes, no, I mean, sir, please, allow me to rectify this immediately." He scurried around the counter, nearly tripping over his own feet. He practically shoved Chloe, the teller, out of the way. $5,000, you said?" he asked, his hands shaking so badly he could barely operate the keyboard. "Of course. Right away. In hundreds? 50s? Whatever you prefer, sir." "Hundreds will be fine," I said flatly. He fumbled with the cash drawer, his slick, manicured fingers suddenly clumsy and useless. He miscounted twice, dropping a stack of bills on the floor. The security guard, Frank, awkwardly bent down to help him retrieve them. It was pathetic. This man, who had built his entire identity on a pedestal of perceived authority, was crumbling before my eyes. He'd judged me on my hat, my clothes, my boots. He hadn't judged the man, he'd judged the costume, and he'd chosen poorly. After what felt like an eternity, he managed to assemble $5,000. He strapped it neatly and presented it to me with both hands, like an offering to a wrathful god. "Here you are, Mr. Franklin, and please accept my most profound apologies for the inconvenience and for the damage to your card. We will have a new one messengered to your home this afternoon. A premium metal card, of course, with our highest tier of benefits. On the house." I took the money and tucked it into my jacket pocket without counting it. I looked past him to the young teller, Chloe. She was still pressed against the back wall, looking like a deer caught in the headlights of a semi-truck. "Chloe," I said. Her head snapped up. "You did everything right. You followed procedure, you were polite, and you escalated to your manager when you were supposed to. You handled yourself professionally, even when your boss was not." A flicker of relief, so profound it was almost painful to watch, crossed her face. Thank you, sir." I then turned my full attention back to Penhaligon. He was sweating now, a fine sheen of perspiration on his forehead. "You, on the other hand, Mr. Penhaligon," I said, letting the words hang in the air. "You made a judgment, a personal judgment based on prejudice. You didn't see a customer. You saw a stereotype. And you used your tiny sliver of authority not to serve but to humiliate. Sir, I assure you, it was a lapse in judgment that will never happen again," he pleaded, his voice cracking. "You're right about that," I said. "It will never happen again. Not here, anyway." I took a step back from the counter, ready to leave. I had what I came for, and so much more. But as I turned, I saw the 2 pieces of my debit card still sitting on the counter. A thought, cold and clear, solidified in my mind. This wasn't just about one arrogant manager. This was about the culture he was allowed to breed. This was about my bank, my investment, my name. An apology wasn't enough. A firing wasn't enough. This cancer needed to be cut out at the root. I stopped and turned back. Penhaligon looked at me, a desperate hope in his eyes, thinking perhaps I was about to offer him some small measure of grace. "You know what, Mr. Penhaligon," I said, a new idea taking shape. "I'm not leaving just yet. I think it's time for an impromptu branch audit, a full performance review, for everyone." My gaze swept across the lobby, over the tellers, the loan officers in their cubicles, and finally landed back on the terrified branch manager. "And you," I said, pointing a finger at him, "you're going to help me. You and I are going to sit down in your little glass office, and you're going to pull up the personnel files for every single person you manage, starting with your own. The walk to Mr. Penhaligon's office was the longest 10 yards of his life. He moved like a man on his way to the gallows, his expensive Italian shoes scuffing on the marble floor. I followed a few paces behind, a silent predator stalking its wounded prey. The entire bank staff watched us go, their faces a mixture of fear, confusion, and in some cases, a barely concealed flicker of satisfaction. I could only imagine what kind of tyrant Penhaligon was when the main shareholder wasn't around. His office was exactly as I'd pictured it, minimalist, impersonal, and ostentatious. A massive mahogany desk dominated the space, completely clear except for a sleek laptop and a ridiculously expensive-looking pen set. Behind it, a wall of glass looked out over his domain, allowing him to survey his employees like a king. It was a throne room, not a manager's office. "Sit," I said, gesturing, not to the plush visitor's chair, but to his own high-backed leather throne. I remained standing, deliberately taking the position of power. He sank into the chair, which seemed to swallow his diminished form. "Pull up the employee files," I commanded. "As I said, we'll start with yours." His hands trembled as he woke the laptop. He typed in his password, his fingers fumbling on the keys. A moment later, his own professional history was glowing on the screen. I leaned over his shoulder to read it, my presence crowding him, making him shrink even further into the chair. "An MBA from Wharton. Impressive," I commented, my voice devoid of any actual admiration. "You've been with the bank for 8 years, manager of this branch for 3. Your performance reviews are glowing." I scanned the text. "Exceeds expectations. Demonstrates strong leadership. Maintains branch profitability." It was all corporate jargon, meaningless words on a screen that told me nothing about the man. "These reviews," I asked, pointing at the screen. "Who writes them?" "My regional supervisor, sir, Mr. Davies," he whispered. "And how often does Mr. Davies visit this branch?" He comes for the quarterly financial briefings." "So 4 times a year he looks at your spreadsheet, sees that you're making money, and gives you a gold star?" I asked. "Does he ever talk to your staff? To Chloe? To the security guard, Frank? Does he ever sit in the lobby on a rainy Tuesday and just watch?" Penhaligon didn't answer. He just stared at the screen, his face pale. "No, I didn't think so," I said. "Now pull up the customer complaint file for this branch." A new wave of panic washed over him. "Sir, those files they're generally for internal review only." "I am internal review, Mr. Penhaligon," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. "Pull them up. Now." He complied, his clicks hesitant and slow. A list of names and dates populated the screen. It wasn't a long list, but it was there. I scanned the subject lines. "Dispute over fees." "Unprofessional conduct of staff." "Account closed without notice." "Open the one from 3 weeks ago." "Unprofessional conduct." He clicked it. The file opened to reveal a detailed letter from an elderly woman named Mrs. Gable. She had been a customer at this branch for over 40 years. She wrote that she had come in to ask for help setting up online banking, and the manager, Mr. Penhaligon, had been rude and dismissive. He had, in her words, spoken to me as if I were a foolish old woman who was wasting his precious time, and had pawned her off on a junior teller without so much as a backward glance. He hadn't just been unhelpful, he had made her feel small, insignificant. I felt a cold anger solidify in my gut. This wasn't a one-time lapse in judgment. This was a pattern. He didn't just discriminate based on hats. He discriminated based on age, on perceived intelligence, on anything that didn't fit his narrow, self-important worldview. "What was the resolution to this complaint?" I asked, my voice dangerously calm. Penhaligon swallowed hard. I sent her a form letter, apologizing for any misunderstanding, and a voucher for a free box of checks." "A form letter," I repeated, the words tasting like ash in my mouth. "For a 40-year customer, you humiliated. You didn't call her. You didn't invite her back in to personally help her. You sent her a template and a coupon." I straightened up and walked around the desk, placing myself between him and the door. I crossed my arms and looked down at him. You don't get it, do you? You think this bank is about numbers, about profit margins and quarterly reports. You're wrong. A bank, a real bank, is built on trust. It's built on relationships. It's the place people come when they're buying their first home, or starting a business, or saving for their child's education. It's supposed to be a cornerstone of the community. And you, with your Wharton MBA and your condescending sneer, you are rotting it from the inside out. He opened his mouth to protest, to offer another pathetic excuse, but I cut him off. I'm not just firing you, Penhaligon. That's too easy. That lets you off the hook. No, you and I are going to do something else first. I pulled out my phone again and dialed Richard Sterling. He answered on the first half ring. Dan, is it handled? Not yet, Richard, I said, my eyes boring into Penhaligon. I need you to do something for me. I need you to get me the home phone number for a Mrs. Gable. She's a customer at the Brook Park branch. And while you're at it, start organizing an emergency meeting. Not for the board, for every single branch manager in the tri-state area, in person, tomorrow morning at the downtown headquarters. Attendance is not optional. Richard was smart enough not to ask too many questions. Consider it done, Dan. I'll text you the number in a minute. I hung up. A moment later my phone buzzed with a text. I looked at the number, then held the phone out to the terrified man in the chair. Here's what's going to happen, I said, the plan forming in my mind, cold and precise. You're going to call Mrs. Gable. You're going to apologize to her, a real, human apology. And then you're going to offer to drive to her home, right now, and personally set up her online banking for her, on her own computer. And I'm going to be sitting right here, listening to every word you say on speakerphone. His hand shook as he took my phone. This was a deeper humiliation than being fired. I was forcing him to confront the human cost of his arrogance. He slowly typed in the numbers, his breathing shallow. He pressed the speakerphone button, and the phone began to ring. A fragile elderly voice answered. Hello? Mrs. Gable, Penhaligon squeaked, his voice cracking with nerves. This is Manager Penhaligon from Heritage Union Bank. I'm calling about the letter you sent. I leaned back against the glass wall, a silent observer. This was the first step. But it wasn't the last. Penhaligon was just a symptom of a much larger disease. And tomorrow morning, when I had every one of his peers gathered in one room, I was going to perform surgery. The phone call to Mrs. Gable was excruciating. Penhaligon, under my watchful gaze, stammered through an apology that was at first stilted and formulaic. But as the elderly woman on the other end of the line spoke, something shifted. She didn't yell or scold. She just sounded weary, explaining with a quiet dignity how the bank had been her husband's and his father's before him, and how she felt like a stranger in a place that should have felt like home. By the end of the call, Penhaligon's apology sounded genuine, stripped of its corporate varnish. He sounded like a man who had been forced for the first time in years to see another human being's perspective. He made arrangements to visit her that very afternoon. It was a start. When he hung up, he looked utterly defeated. Am I still fired? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Your employment status is the least of your concerns right now, I said, my voice flat. Your character is what's under review. We'll see how you conduct yourself at Mrs. Gable's house. I'll be calling her for a follow-up. Don't think for a second I won't. I turned and walked out of his glass cage, leaving him to contemplate the wreckage of his morning. The next day I walked into the main conference room at the Heritage Union headquarters. I wasn't wearing my work clothes or the MAGA hat. I was in a dark, tailored suit, the kind I wore when I was closing deals worth more than the GDP of a small country. The room was packed with over 100 branch managers, all sipping coffee and making nervous small talk. They'd been summoned with no explanation, and the air was thick with anxious speculation. Richard Sterling stood near the podium, looking grim. He gave me a slight nod as I entered. A murmur went through the room as I walked to the front. They didn't know who I was, but they knew I was important. I stepped up to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at their faces. I saw a sea of Penhaligon's men and women in sharp suits, with confident smiles and an air of detached professionalism. Good morning, I began, my voice amplified by the speakers, filling every corner of the room. My name is Daniel Franklin. For those of you who don't know me, I am the majority shareholder of this bank." A wave of shock rippled through the audience. Phones were discreetly lowered, postures straightened. Every eye was locked on me. Yesterday, I decided to visit one of our branches, unannounced. I wanted to see how we were doing, not on a spreadsheet, but on the ground. I dressed not as a shareholder, but as a customer, an ordinary customer. I paused, letting the words sink in. I wore a pair of work boots, a flannel shirt, and a red hat, and I attempted to withdraw $5,000 of my own money. I let my gaze sweep across the room. The branch manager refused my transaction. He told me I didn't fit the profile of a Heritage Union customer. He judged me by my clothes and my hat. He humiliated me in front of a lobby full of people, and then he took out a pair of scissors and cut my debit card in half. A collective gasp went through the room. The managers looked at each other, their faces pale with horror. They were all imagining themselves in that manager's shoes. This man, I continued, my voice like ice, made a judgment. He saw a stereotype, not a person, and in doing so, he failed. He failed at his job. He failed our customer. And he failed this institution. This isn't just about one bad manager. This is about a culture. A culture that prioritizes profit over people. A culture that sees customers as account numbers, not as human beings with dreams and families and 40 years of loyalty. I pointed to a large screen behind me. We're going to be making some changes. Effective immediately, we are launching the Franklin Initiative. First, a complete overhaul of our customer service training. We will no longer be teaching our staff to just be polite. We will be teaching them to be empathetic, to listen, to solve problems, not create them. The screen lit up with the first bullet point. Empathy First Training Program. Second, I went on, we are creating a new bonus structure. From now on, 50% of every branch manager's annual bonus will not be tied to loan quotas or new account numbers. It will be tied directly to customer satisfaction scores and employee morale surveys. If your customers are unhappy and your staff is miserable, you will not get a bonus. I don't care how much money you made the bank. There were audible gulps. This hit them where they lived. Third, I said, my voice hardening, we are instituting a undercover customer program. Once a quarter, an executive, myself or Mr. Sterling included, will be visiting branches, dressed like ordinary people, conducting ordinary transactions. We'll be seeing, firsthand, if the lessons are sticking. If you fail the test, there will be consequences. I let them digest that for a moment. The fear in the room was palpable. It was exactly what I wanted. Heritage Union was built on the idea that a bank should serve its community. Somewhere along the way, we've lost sight of that. We became a corporation of glass and steel instead of a partnership of people. That ends today. Today we start the hard work of earning back the trust we've squandered. Today we remember that the name on the front of the bank is less important than the names of the people who walk through its doors. I finished my speech, and a stunned silence fell over the room. I hadn't raised my voice, but the message was a thunderclap. This was a revolution. After the meeting, as the managers filed out with grim, determined expressions, Richard came over. "What about Penhaligon?" he asked. "He's on indefinite probation," I said. "I've reassigned him. He's not a manager anymore. He's being sent to our oldest branch, downtown, the one that serves the lowest income neighborhood in the city. His new job is Community Outreach Specialist. His only metric for success will be helping people who have been overlooked and undervalued. People like Mrs. Gable. People like the man he thought I was yesterday." Richard raised an eyebrow. "You think he can do it?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But I believe in second chances. Not for the arrogant manager, but for the man underneath. He's going to learn what this bank is really about, one person at a time. And if he can't, then he has no place here. But if he can—" I trailed off, thinking of the fear and, eventually, the flicker of understanding in his eyes. "If he can, then maybe we all can." I looked out the window at the city, at the thousands of people who trusted us with their lives and their futures. The work was just beginning, and this time I was going to make sure we got it right.